I guess the round three would be psychopaths.
Oh, yes, yes. So
Good.
that's another one.
So, what is the actual definition of that before you even go any further?
So it used to be called, well, it's antisocial personality disorder. That term sociopath and psychopath, they're really all that mean the same thing. It doesn't mean someone is actually psychotic, like they're not hearing
So,
voices.
sociopath and psychopath are the same definition.
Yep. Antisocial, psychopath, sociopath, just
Okay.
another name for the same thing that's kind of changed over time, probably because there's a little bit of a stigma attached to those names or confusion about those names.
Yeah, the psycho, I'm sure people don't like that, because it's, it's not the nicest word, but yeah.
Right. And, but really, it's really that criminal behavior, actually. It's the person that, violates the rights of others and they don't care and they really don't care about your feelings. They might actually even enjoy, hurting other people because they really don't have empathy. And they're very deceitful, they'll be very conniving. If there's someone in the office, my radar goes up when someone is actually charming. Snakes are charming, right? So if someone's very cunning and, they can be that, they put on that charm, and it's always on my radar that, oh, maybe there's a motivation here, maybe there's some secondary gain that they're looking for. They do tend to use substances, they do tend to break the law. So, and they're not always people that are like killers, you're not always dealing with like Hannibal Lecter all the time, but there could be some very legal activity, antisocials that just basically just don't care about your feelings or any regard for you necessarily.
Wow.
Yeah.
And just reminds me of someone in my wrestling world I used to know. But what do you even do for a person like this? And number one, is this something they're born with, or are they made?
There is a genetic predisposition too. Sometimes there's other antisocials in the family, or sometimes there are family members that might have substance use disorders and things like that. It's also an environmental thing. So if people have grown up in broken homes or homes of neglect, or maybe have been from one foster home to another, they may have learned maybe illegal ways to deal with things in order to survive. It's become more of a survival mechanism for them to be deceitful and lying. So it's a difficult one to not just engage. Once again, you have to build trust there. But there's really some military camp type places that actually work with people with really behavioral issues. And it's still, they probably say it's the one that's the hardest to actually break that pattern. But I still think, I always think there's hope for rehabilitation for everybody, really.
Well,
So
that means you're a good doctor because you believe that, Yeah, what, I mean, it sounds to me, especially with that one, the best thing you could do is just separate yourself from them. I mean, I don't know what advice you could say, but besides let the doctors try to handle them, provided they could get, they want even to be helped,
Right. Well, certainly in a relationship, they're going to be lying to you all the time, and they're always going to blame you for everything. Mm-hmm. And they may drag you into a precarious situation that you're like, then what? They're going to draw you into trouble if they're always creating trouble in their own lives. So probably best to stay away from that. Absolutely.
Yeah. And if God forbid this is one of your family members you care about, where do you start? Like,
yeah. I love you, but you have to have that wall in between you a little bit, depending on how much, because there's always a range. Sometimes people have a little trait, and when you read about these things, you're going to hear that everybody has some of these traits. That's actually a normal thing. But if there's
Sure.
4 or 5 things that really are pervasive and really stand out in their lives over a period of time, that's when it really becomes a disorder.
Gotcha. Okay. And could this be this could be passed on? I mean, could all this be passed on to having another child?
Yes, genetically it can be, but also I would say that people pick up on your patterns. Kids see that, and they model themselves after their parents too. So if they're seeing sort of slippery kind of behavior, they're more prone to learning that from them,
Mhm.
especially if it's getting them what they want. If it's serving a purpose and they're get good at it, they can get what they want.
Do they know they're wrong, or do they just think like this was the way it seemed right, so and it was working, so ride it out?
Yeah, they don't really have any conscience, which is really scary to think about. So they don't tend to feel guilt. They don't really have remorse about things. It's just what they do. So um, they don't really care about how it affects other people. The only time it really affects them is, if they end up in jail for something, that's going to affect them. But it's still probably someone else's fault. They still don't always accept their own ownership for what they did.
So anybody in the audience that's this might be hitting home with, and they know somebody, like what would you advise for them to even start trying to help someone like this that might have one of these three?
So if they really needed help, I mean, certainly
Or
there's
just know a family
resources.
member or something like that sounds like them. You hit the nail on the head. How did they go about helping them?
I would say, well, certainly if they needed a place to live, they would have to, possibly go to a shelter environment or get in contact with a social worker or a crisis center. I think just helping them to engage in some kind of treatment, because it's not always just the antisocial. They're either getting into trouble all the time with the law or they're using substances. If it's some other kind of disorder that they're dealing with, like maybe the substance issue is their primary disorder, and they're just getting their needs met by using their maladaptive personality, then maybe treating the disorder first of the substance use and getting that kind of help first. They could kind of work on their personality after they get clean or sober, that type of thing. So it's almost never, there's always something else going on.
So, is there when it comes to this, the psychopath, is there even a true end game? Are they fixable?
Yeah, it's probably the lowest amount of success even with treatment, but if you're able to treat all those other things around it, I think there's the opportunity to change their ways. And once again, I mean, you always hear these stories, which I love, of people that have been in and out of prison for years at a
Yeah.
time, and then have a moment of clarity and realize that this isn't the way they want to live anymore, and change their lives, and get a career and establish a job and a family and all of those things. Those stories really do happen, probably not as often as we'd like, but I really feel like there's possibility for that to happen for
Well,
sure.
that's where you and the other doctors of the world come in. Hopefully they could all be reached, right?
Absolutely. There's so much need out there. Absolutely.